The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that ran through every deck. Captain Minu stood on the bridge of the survey vessel, his hands gripped tight on the railing. They had traveled for 3 weeks to reach this system, and now the stars of New Haven shone through the forward windows. "Try the colony again," Minu said to his communications officer. Pressed buttons on her console, her face lit by the glow of screens. "Still nothing, Captain. No response from the orbital stations. No response from the surface. Not even automated beacons." That was wrong. Every colony had automated systems that never stopped broadcasting. Safety protocols demanded it. Minu felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What do your sensors show?" he asked his first officer. Looked up from her station and her face was pale. "Sir, I'm detecting debris. A lot of debris. It's everywhere in orbit." Minu walked to her station and looked at the display. The screen showed thousands of objects floating in space around the planet. His breath caught. Those weren't asteroids or natural objects. Those were pieces of the orbital stations. The massive platforms that housed 50,000 people were now broken into fragments, spreading across space like shattered glass. "Get me visuals," he ordered. The main screen changed to show the planet below. New Haven was supposed to be beautiful. The colonists had sent pictures home every month showing green fields and new cities. Minu had seen those pictures. He had a cousin who lived there with her family. Now the planet looked wrong. The cities were dark. Where there should have been lights marking streets and buildings, there was nothing. As the ship's sensors focused, the truth became clear. The cities weren't dark. They were gone. Melted metal and ash marked where 300,000 people had built their homes. "Mother of Earth," whispered from the science station. The young officer's hands shook as he worked his controls. "Captain, these readings. The surface temperatures in the city zones are over 3,000 degrees. Nothing could survive that." "How long ago?" Minu asked. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. "Based on the cooling rates and debris dispersal, 6 days, maybe 7. 6 days. The colony had been destroyed 6 days ago and no one had known. No distress signal. No warning. 340,000 people had simply ceased to exist, and Earth had received no message." "What kind of weapons do this?" Minu asked. Studied his screens. "The signature is plasma-based but much hotter than anything we use. The attacks were precise and coordinated. Every population center was hit at the same time. This wasn't random. This was planned." Minu closed his eyes. Planned. Someone had decided that every man, woman, and child on New Haven needed to die. Someone had brought enough firepower to turn entire cities into slag. Someone had done this and then left without a word. "Scan all frequencies. Look for any recordings, any data fragments, anything that might tell us who did this." The communications officer worked in silence for 10 minutes. Everyone on the bridge waited. The only sound was the quiet hum of the ship systems and the occasional beep of sensors. "Got something," finally said. "It's a fragment from one of the defense satellites. It was recording when it was destroyed. The file is corrupted, but I can clean it up." "Do it," Minu ordered. They waited. Minu thought about his cousin. Her name was, and she had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They would have been in school when the attack came. Did they have time to be afraid? Or was it so fast they never knew? "Captain, I have it," said. Her voice was tight. The main screen showed a grainy image. Space was dark and then ships appeared. They were sleek and crystalline like they were carved from ice. Their hulls reflected starlight in strange patterns. There were dozens of them, moving in perfect formation toward the orbital stations. "Freeze it there," Minu said. "Can you identify those ships?" The science officer worked quickly, comparing the image to the database of known alien vessels. After a moment he looked up. "There, Captain, the collective." The name hung in the air like poison. They were a species humanity had met 3 years ago. The first contact had been peaceful, Trade discussions had started. Diplomatic channels had been opened. Earth had offered friendship. Why? Asked. We had good relations with them. Why would they do this? Pulled up files on his screen. 2 months ago, they sent a message to Earth. They claimed this system was in disputed territory. They demanded we abandon New Haven. The Earth Assembly refused and offered mediation. They never responded. So they did this instead, Minyu said flatly. They killed everyone rather than talk. He stood straight and walked to the command chair. His crew watched him, waiting for orders. These were good people. They had signed up to explore and survey, not to witness genocide. But now they were witnesses and they had a duty. Record everything, Minyu ordered. Every sensor reading, every image, every piece of debris. I want a complete record of what happened here. Prepare a data burst to send to Earth. Priority Alpha. Mark it for the Earth Assembly and the military command. Yes, sir, said quietly. Minyu sat in his chair and began recording his own report. His hands wanted to shake, but he forced them steady. Someone at Earth needed to know exactly what happened. They needed to know that they had murdered an entire colony without warning. They needed to know that 340,000 humans were dead. When he finished the report, he added one more word at the end. Just one word, but it carried the weight of all those lost lives. Justice. He sent the message and then he waited. The ship stayed in orbit above New Haven, keeping watch over the grave of a world. The crew worked in silence, documenting everything. Sometimes Minyu saw officers wiping their eyes. He didn't stop them. Tears were appropriate. 3 days later, Earth responded. The message was short and carried the seal of the Earth Assembly. Minyu read it on his private screen. Survey Vessel Horizon's Edge. Your report received. Return to base immediately. All military and reserve personnel are being recalled. The Reckoning Protocol has been activated. Earth sends its thanks for your service. What comes next is justice. Minyu read the message 3 times. The Reckoning Protocol. He had heard of it but never thought he would see it used. It was the plan for total war, created decades ago and never activated. Until now. He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the dead world below. Somewhere in the burned ruins was his cousin and her family. Somewhere down there were children who would never grow up, artists who would never create, farmers who would never see harvest. They'll answer for this, he whispered to the planet. I promise you, they'll answer for every single life. The ship turned and began the journey home. Behind them, New Haven drifted in silence, a monument to the cost of peace and the price of mercy shown to those who had none. Across human space, the message was spreading. In government halls and military bases, on colony worlds and space stations, humanity was receiving the news. The age of peace was ending. The age of reckoning was about to begin. The unified Earth Assembly chamber was silent. 500 delegates from every corner of human space sat in their seats, watching the screens that showed the evidence from New Haven. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They watched cities burn and orbital stations shatter, and they watched until the last image faded. Ambassador Sora stood at the central podium. She had been a diplomat for 30 years, had negotiated treaties with a dozen alien species, and had always believed in peace. Now she stood before the assembly and felt that belief crack. 2 months ago, she began, her voice steady, the collective sent us a demand. They claimed New Haven was in their territory. They told us to evacuate 340,000 people from homes they had built over 15 years. We refused. We offered to negotiate. We offered mediation. We offered arbitration by neutral parties. She paused and looked around the chamber. They never responded to any of our offers. Instead, 6 days ago, they responded with this. The screens lit up again, showing the ships opening fire on the orbital stations. Delegates watched people die. They watched homes burn. They watched a world end. Every human on New Haven is dead, Sora said. Men, Women, children, all of them. They did not send warnings. They did not allow evacuations. They simply killed everyone and left. She stepped back from the podium. The question before this assembly is simple. What do we do now? The chamber erupted in voices. Delegates shouted proposals and demands. Some called for immediate military action. Others urged caution and diplomacy. A few suggested economic sanctions. The noise rose until President stood from his seat and the chamber fell silent again. Was an old man who had led Earth through 2 decades of peace and prosperity. He had white hair and a face lined with years of hard decisions. Now he walked to the podium slowly, and every eye followed him. "I have spoken with military command," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. "Admiral has presented me with options. I have reviewed them. Now I will present them to you." He pressed a button, and new images appeared on the screens. They showed massive shipyards in orbit around Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. They showed warehouses stretching for kilometers. They showed weapons that had been stored in the cold darkness of space. "For 80 years humanity has been at peace," continued. "But peace does not mean we forgot how to fight. Every generation we have built ships. We have trained soldiers. We have prepared for the possibility that someone somewhere would mistake our desire for peace as weakness." He looked around the chamber. That preparation is about to pay a dividend. New numbers appeared on the screens. Delegates gasped. Some stood from their seats. Others simply stared. "We can mobilize 700,000 warships," said. 700,000. This is the largest military force any species has ever assembled. We have the industrial capacity to supply them. We have the trained personnel to crew them. And we have the will to use them. He paused and let the numbers sink in. 700,000 ships. The delegates had known humanity maintained a military, but nobody had imagined this. Nobody had guessed at the scale. "This is the reckoning protocol," said. "Total mobilization, total commitment. We will recall every military vessel. We will activate every reserve ship. We will organize them into 7 battle groups, and we will take them to space." "What is the objective?" one delegate asked. His face became hard as stone. "Justice. We will dismantle the military. We will ensure they can never threaten another human world. And we will make it clear to every species in the galaxy that attacking humanity carries a price they cannot afford to pay." The vote was taken. It was unanimous. Every delegate voted yes. The reckoning protocol was activated. In military headquarters on Mars, Admiral stood before a wall of screens showing the deployment plan. He was a career officer who had spent 40 years preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now that war was here, and he felt strangely calm. "We organize into 7 battle groups," he told his staff. "Each group will have a specific target. They have approximately 80,000 military vessels spread across their empire. We will outnumber them at every engagement." His second-in-command, Admiral, studied the plans. "What about civilian casualties?" "We avoid them," said firmly. "We target military installations only. We are not murderers. We are soldiers seeking justice, not revenge. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," said. Across human space, the mobilization began. On Earth, reserve officers received activation notices. On Mars, shipyards that had been quiet for decades roared to life. On the outer colonies, militia units prepared to deploy. Humanity was moving like a single organism, every part working toward one goal. On the colony world of Eden's Rest, Sergeant read his activation notice on his home computer. He was 42 years old and had not worn a uniform in 15 years. He worked as a teacher now, educating the colony's children. He had a wife named and 2 daughters. He showed the notice. She read it and then hugged him tightly. "How long?" she asked. "I don't know," said honestly, "until it's done." His oldest daughter was 16. She found him packing his old uniform that evening. "Dad, why do you have to go?" she asked. "Can't someone else fight?" Sat on the bed and looked at his daughter. She had her mother's eyes and his stubborn chin. She was smart and kind, and he loved her more than anything in the world. "Do you remember the pictures from New Haven?" he asked. "The ones they showed on the news?" Nodded, her face pale. "There were kids your age there," said. "They went to school, they had families, they had dreams about their future. Now they're gone, all of them. And the reason they're gone is because someone decided human lives don't matter." He took her hand. "I'm going because if we don't, then every human world becomes New Haven. Every colony becomes a target. Your mom, your sister, you. All of you would be in danger. I can't let that happen. Nobody can." Hugged him and cried. Held her and wondered if the parents thought about their children. He wondered if they understood what was coming. In the capital, intelligence reports were arriving. The High Council read them with growing concern. Their analysts had detected massive fleet movements in human space. The numbers seemed impossible. 700,000 ships, Council leader said. "That cannot be correct. No species maintains such a force." The intelligence officer stood nervously. "The data has been multiple times, honored leader. The humans are mobilizing their entire military. They are also activating reserve vessels that have been in storage." Dismissed the officer and turned to his military commander. "Can we defend against this?" The commander studied his own reports. "We have 80,000 ships, honored leader. If these numbers are correct, we are outnumbered nearly 9-1. Then we fortify our positions," decided. "We make them pay for every system. They will lose their appetite for war when they see the cost." But even as he spoke, felt doubt. He had approved the attack on New Haven because he believed humans were weak. They had not fought a major war in 80 years. They spent their time on art and science and exploration. They seemed soft. Now he wondered if that softness had been choice rather than weakness. Now he wondered what humanity was like when the softness ended. In the Triton shipyards above Neptune, Director watched the reserve fleet come alive. He had maintained these ships for 20 years, keeping them ready for a war he hoped would never come. Now hundreds of vessels were undocking, their engines glowing bright as they formed into squadrons. Each ship had been in cold storage, their systems shut down, their corridors dark. Now lights blazed in every window. Crew members ran through pre-flight checks. Weapons were loaded. Shields were tested. Stood at the observation window and watched a battleship drift past. It was 3 kilometers long, covered in armor and weapons. It had been built 30 years ago and had never fired a shot in anger. Now it would join 699,999 other ships in the largest military operation in human history. "They wanted war," whispered. "We'll give them annihilation." The fleet continued to grow. Ships arrived from every corner of human space. They organized into groups, each group larger than most species' entire military. Supply vessels formed chains that stretched across light years. Medical frigates prepared for casualties. Troop transports loaded soldiers and equipment. And in the center of it all, Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the tactical display showing the entire force. 700,000 points of light, each one representing a warship crewed by humans who had chosen to answer the call. "All groups report status," he ordered. One by one, the group commanders reported ready. Every ship was armed. Every crew was trained. Every system was operational. Humanity's sword was drawn, and now it was time to strike. "Set course for space," ordered. "All ships prepare for FTL jump. Today we teach the galaxy a lesson it will never forget." Space around Mars looked like a city made of stars. 700,000 warships gathered in staging areas that stretched across millions of kilometers. They organized into 7 massive battle groups, each one carrying a name that spoke of humanity's anger. Battle Group Vengeance, Battle Group Retribution, Battle Group Justice. 4 more groups, each one larger than any military force the galaxy had ever seen. Commander stood on the bridge of his destroyer, watching smaller ships move into formation around him. He commanded a squadron of 50 vessels, which seemed large until he remembered that 50 squadrons made a division, and 10 divisions made a group, and he was just one tiny part of Battle Group Vengeance. "All ships report ready," his tactical officer said. Nodded. He was young for a commander, only 30 years old, but he had trained his whole career for this. He had studied warfare and tactics and strategy. He had run simulations and practiced maneuvers, but this was not a simulation. This was real, and somewhere at the end of their journey, people would die. "Maintain formation," he ordered. "Stay tight on the flagship's signal." The fleet began to move, slowly at first, then building speed as they cleared Mars orbit. They were heading for the outer system, where they would make the jump to faster-than-light travel. The journey to space would take 3 days. Thought about those 3 days. 3 days to think about what they were going to do. 3 days to wonder if he would survive. 3 days to remember why they were doing this. He pulled up the file on New Haven on his personal screen. He had read it a dozen times, but he read it again. 340,000 names. He scrolled through them slowly. Every name was a person. Every person had a story. Every story had ended in fire. "Sir, we're receiving a priority message," his communications officer said. "It's from Admiral playing now." The main screen changed to show the Admiral. He looked tired, like he had not slept in days. Probably he had not. "To all personnel of the fleet," said, "in a few hours we will jump to FTL. When we arrive at space, we will be the largest military force ever assembled by any species. They will see us coming and they will be afraid." He paused. Good. They should be afraid. They murdered 340,000 humans without warning or mercy. Now they will learn that such actions carry a price. "But," continued, his voice becoming harder, "we are not them. We do not murder civilians. We do not target homes and schools and hospitals. We are soldiers, not butchers. Our targets are military installations and military vessels only. Anyone who violates this will answer to me personally. Is that understood?" Nodded along with the message. That was good. That was right. They were going to war, but they would not become monsters to fight monsters. "Remember New Haven," finished. "Remember who we fight for. And remember that today humanity shows the galaxy what justice looks like." Admiral out. The screen went dark, sat back in his chair and looked at his crew. They were young people, most of them. Some had families back on Earth or the colonies. Some had never seen combat. All of them looked scared. "You heard the Admiral said. We do this right. We do this clean. And we make sure New Haven is the last human world that ever burns. Understood?" "Yes, sir," they replied together. The fleet jumped to FTL in waves, space tearing open as hundreds of thousands of ships vanished from normal space. Watched the stars stretch and blur as his ship made the transition. The journey had begun. 3 days later, they arrived at the border of space. The fleet dropped out of FTL in perfect formation, and sensors immediately began scanning for targets. "Contact," the tactical officer reported. "Patrol fleet bearing 270, estimated strength, 200 vessels. 200 ships. Under normal circumstances, that would be a major fleet. Now it was nothing. Squadron alone had 50 ships. Battle Group Vengeance had 120,000. Orders from the flagship," communications reported. "We are to engage and destroy, show them what's coming." Allowed himself a cold smile. "All ships, weapons hot, target lock on hostile vessels, on my mark, fire." His squadron opened fire as one. Missiles launched, leaving bright trails across the darkness. Rail guns fired, sending solid slugs at impossible speeds. Energy weapons lit up the space between the two fleets. They tried to fight back. Their ships were elegant and deadly, covered in crystalline armor that reflected weapon fire. Their own weapons struck out, plasma bolts that could burn through ship hulls. But there were 50 human ships and only 200. The math was simple. For every missile they shot down, 3 more got through. For every human ship they damaged, 10 more vessels died. Enemy flagship destroyed, Tactical reported. Enemy formation breaking apart. They're trying to retreat. Don't let them, ordered. I want every single ship accounted for. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, 200 ships were debris, and not a single human vessel had been destroyed. 14 ships reported damage, but all were still operational. Opened a communication channel on all frequencies, including the ones they used. "This is commander of the human fleet," he said, his voice cold. "We just destroyed your patrol with 1 squadron. We have 700,000 ships. We're coming for your military. We're coming for everyone who decided New Haven should die. This is just the beginning." He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "Send all data to the flagship. Let's move to the next target." Across space, the warning spread. They had communications networks just like humanity, and news traveled fast. A human fleet had appeared at the border. 200 ships had been destroyed in 11 minutes. The humans were broadcasting on open channels, promising destruction. At first, the High Council did not believe the reports. Then more data arrived. Sensor readings from deep space stations showed the truth. The humans had not sent a fleet. They had sent an armada. Every sensor that looked toward human space saw the same thing. Thousands upon thousands of warships, all heading toward systems. Council leaders stood in the command center, watching the tactical display with growing horror. The display showed red markers representing human ships, and there were so many red markers that they blurred together into a solid mass. "How many?" he asked. The military commander looked at his own screens. His hands were shaking. "Initial estimates suggest 600,000 to 700,000 vessels. They're organized into 7 major groups. Each group is larger than our entire military." Felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. Pure, cold fear. The collective had 80,000 ships. It had seemed like a powerful military enough to control their territory and project strength. Now it seemed laughably small. "Where are they heading?" demanded. "Everywhere," the commander said. "They're splitting into multiple groups. Some are heading for our colony worlds. Some are heading for our military bases. And the largest group, it's heading straight for Prime." Looked at the display showing his. 4 billion lived on that planet. It was the heart of their civilization, the center of their culture. Now a human fleet of almost 500,000 ships was heading directly toward it. "Recall all military vessels," ordered. "Every ship from every system, bring them to Prime. We'll make our stand there." "That will leave our colonies undefended," the commander protested. "Our colonies are already lost," said bitterly. "Look at those numbers. We can't defend everything. We have to concentrate our forces or we'll be destroyed piecemeal." Orders went out across the collective. Every military ship received the same message: return to Prime immediately. Defensive stations were activated. Orbital platforms began arming their weapons. Soldiers prepared for invasion. But even as they prepared, everyone knew the truth. They had started this war by murdering an entire human colony. Now humanity was coming to finish it. In neutral space, other alien species watched the events with shock. The Republic, one of the largest powers in the galaxy, had been monitoring human transmissions. Their ambassadors had tried to contact Earth, offering to mediate the conflict. Ambassador Sora had taken the meeting via long-range communication. The ambassador was a dignified creature with purple skin and too many eyes. "Ambassador Sora," they said, "the Republic urges restraint. This conflict can still be resolved through diplomacy." Sora's face was cold. Where was this diplomatic concern 6 days ago? Where was the Republic when 340,000 humans were being murdered? Where was the offer of mediation then? We were not aware of the attack until it was too late, Sora interrupted. Your mediation is 6 days too late, Ambassador. 6 days and 340,000 lives too late. Humanity tried diplomacy with the... They responded with genocide. Now we respond with justice. But 700,000 ships, the ambassador protested. That's not justice, that's annihilation. No, Sora said firmly. Annihilation is what happened to New Haven. What we're bringing is accountability. Good day, Ambassador. She cut the transmission and stood alone in her office. Through the window, she could see Earth below, blue and green and peaceful. Somewhere up there, beyond her sight, the fleet was moving. 700,000 ships carrying humanity's anger toward the... She thought about New Haven. She thought about all those names on the list. She thought about the children who would never grow up and the parents who would never see them again. Let the galaxy watch, she whispered. Let them see what happens when you murder humans. In orbit above Prime, the defense fleet gathered. 60,000 warships took up positions around there. It was the largest military force that had ever assembled in one place. Under normal circumstances, it would be unstoppable. These were not normal circumstances. The human fleet arrived in waves, dropping out of FTL like a curtain of death. 450,000 warships appeared at the edge of the system, and every single one locked weapons onto targets. On the flagship, Admiral stood and looked at the tactical display. Every red marker was a human ship. Every blue marker was a vessel. The red outnumbered the blue 7-1. Open a channel to the, he ordered, all frequencies. The channel opened and spoke into the silence. People of the collective, your leaders murdered 340,000 humans without warning or mercy. Surrender those responsible and we will spare your civilians. Resist, and we will destroy every military installation in your empire. You have 1 hour to respond. He cut the channel and waited. The hour began to count down. The hour passed in silence. Admiral stood on his bridge, watching the countdown timer reach 0. Behind him, his crew waited at their stations. Around him, 450,000 warships held position, weapons charged and ready. Any response from the asked? No, sir, the communications officer replied. They're maintaining communication silence. Nodded slowly. He had expected this. The High Council was too proud to surrender. They would rather fight and die than admit they were wrong. That pride was about to cost them everything. Signal all ships, ordered. Begin the operation. Battle Group Retribution, you are cleared to engage the outer colonies. All other groups, hold position and await my command. Across space, 110,000 ships broke formation and accelerated toward the outer colonies. These were the smaller settlements, far from the, defended by 20,000 military vessels. Admiral commanded Battle Group Retribution from her flagship. She was a veteran of 40 years, though most of those years had been spent in peace. She had never wanted to see war. Now that it was here, she would finish it quickly. All ships weapons free, she ordered. Target military vessels only. Verify targets before firing. I want 0 civilian casualties. The two fleets met in the space between colonies. 20,000 ships against 110,000 human vessels. They fought with courage and skill, but courage and skill could not overcome such impossible odds. Missiles filled the space between fleets like a swarm of angry insects. Point defense systems on both sides fired desperately, trying to shoot down incoming weapons. Some succeeded. Most did not. Human missiles, designed by engineers who had studied every aspect of warfare, overwhelmed defenses through sheer numbers and coordination. Railgun rounds moved too fast for the eye to follow. They struck ships and punched through crystalline armor like paper. Inside those ships, Soldiers died instantly as the rounds tore through decks and bulkheads. Energy weapons painted lines of light across the darkness. Human lasers, more focused and more powerful than plasma weapons, cut through enemy shields and hulls. Ships died in silence, their atmosphere venting into space, their crews lost. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it ended, 20,000 ships had been destroyed. The human fleet had lost 67 vessels, with 400 damaged but still functional. Admiral looked at the casualty reports with a heavy heart. 67 ships meant approximately 4,000 human deaths. 4,000 people who had left home expecting to return. 4,000 families who would receive terrible news. But 20,000 ships meant perhaps 100,000 enemy deaths. The math was brutal, but it was the math of war. For every human who died, 25 died. The numbers were in humanity's favor. Secure the colonies, ordered. Deploy ground forces to military installations only. Remember, we're here for their military, not their civilians. Human Marines landed on colonies in drop ships. They stormed military bases and command centers. Soldiers, already demoralized from the space battle, surrendered in large numbers. Some fought to the end and died fighting. Most chose to live. Back at Prime, Admiral received the battle reports. Battle Group Retribution had completed its mission. The outer colonies were under human control. Now it was time for the main event. Signal the again, ordered. Tell them they have one more chance to surrender. The message was sent. Again there was no response. Very well, said quietly. All ships begin the assault. Target military installations only. Fire when ready. The human fleet opened fire on the 60,000 ships defending there. The battle that followed was the largest space combat in recorded history. Ships died by the hundreds, then by the thousands. The space around Prime became a graveyard of broken vessels and expanding debris clouds. On one of the human assault carriers, Sergeant stood in the hangar bay with his unit. They were waiting for orders to deploy to the surface. Around them, the ship shook as it fired its weapons at enemy targets. Nervous? Asked Corporal, a young man from Earth who had joined the military straight from school. Terrified, admitted honestly, but we have a job to do. The intercom crackled to life. All units prepare for deployment. We're breaching the orbital defenses now. Ground assault begins in 15 minutes. Checked his weapon for the 10th time. It was loaded and ready. His armor was sealed and functioning. His squad was assembled and prepared. Everything was as ready as it could be. He thought about his daughters back on Eden's Rest. He thought about his wife. He had promised them he would come home. He intended to keep that promise. Listen up, told his squad. Our target is a military command center in the capital city. Intelligence says it's heavily defended. We go in fast, we secure the objective, and we get out. No unnecessary risks. No heroics. We do our job and we go home. Clear. Yes, Sergeant, they replied. The 15 minutes passed like 15 seconds. Then the drop ship's engines roared to life, and they were falling toward the planet below. Through the windows, could see the battle still raging in orbit. Ships were dying up there, both human and... He said a prayer for all of them. The dropship hit atmosphere and began to shake violently. Anti-aircraft fire reached up from the surface, trying to shoot them down. Most of it missed. Some didn't. Watched 3 other dropships explode, their occupants lost. Then they were through and the surface was rushing up to meet them. The dropship slowed and its landing engines fired. They touched down in a military complex and the ramp dropped. Move, 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 shouted, leading his squad out into fire and chaos. Soldiers were everywhere, shooting from defensive positions. Human Marines spread out and returned fire. The battle for the command center had begun. Training took over. He moved from cover to cover, firing controlled bursts at enemy positions. Beside him, Corporal provided suppressing fire while other squad members advanced. They worked like a machine, each person doing their part. A soldier popped up from behind a barricade, fired instinctively, and the soldier fell. He felt nothing, no satisfaction, no guilt, just the cold focus of combat. "Breach the door," ordered. A specialist planted charges on the command center entrance. The explosion blew the door inward and the squad rushed inside. More fighting, more soldiers dying, more humans falling. They reached the command center's main room. Officers stood at their stations, still trying to coordinate the defense. When the humans burst in, most raised their hands in surrender. One tried to reach for a weapon, shot him. "Secure them," ordered. "Call in the specialists to seize their computers and records." The battle for the command center was over. Outside, fighting continued throughout the city, but it was clearly ending. The military was collapsing. In orbit, the space battle reached its climax. The defense fleet, originally 60,000 strong, was now reduced to 3,000 ships. They were surrounded by human vessels on all sides. Some tried to break out and escape. Most failed. A few succeeded, fleeing into deep space. Admiral watched the tactical display with no sense of victory. Yes, they were winning. Yes, the military was being destroyed, but thousands of humans had died to achieve this. Thousands more had died defending their world. War was hell, he thought. Even when you won, you lost something. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the surface," communications reported. "It's from the High Council. They want to discuss terms." "Now they want to talk," said bitterly. "Put them through." The screen showed council leader. The leader looked old and broken. Behind him could see smoke and damage. The council chamber had been hit. "Admiral," said, his voice was quiet, We wish to discuss terms of surrender." "Surrender," said. "You should have thought about that before you murdered 340,000 humans. You should have thought about it when we offered you mediation. You should have thought about it when we gave you an hour to respond." "We made a mistake," said. "We did not understand what we were facing. We thought—" "You thought humans were weak," interrupted. "You thought we would accept the destruction of New Haven and do nothing. You were wrong." He leaned forward. "Here are my terms. You and your entire council will surrender to human authority. You will stand trial for genocide. You will provide complete access to all military installations and records. And you will never, ever threaten another human world again. Accept these terms, or we will continue our assault until your military ceases to exist." Looked at the other council members. They were all thinking the same thing. They had started this war. They had believed humanity was soft. They had learned at terrible cost how wrong they were. "We accept your terms," said finally. "Good," replied. "Human Marines will arrive to take you into custody within the hour. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. Out." He cut the transmission and sat back in his chair. It was over. The shooting would stop. The dying would stop. Now came the hard part: justice, reconstruction, and making sure this never happened again. On the surface, Sergeant received the ceasefire order. He passed it to his squad and they stopped firing. Across the city, the fighting ended. Soldiers put down their weapons and raised their hands. Human Marines took them into custody. Found a wall and sat down against it. His hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fatting. Corporal sat next to him. "We made it," said. "Some of us did," replied. He had lost 3 members of his squad in the fighting, 3 people who had trusted him to lead them, 3 people who would never go home. But the war was over. New Haven had been answered. Justice, however imperfect, had been served. Above them, the human fleet began the process of standing down. 450,000 warships powered down their weapons and began organizing for the journey home. They had done what they came to do. In the wreckage and ruins, humanity would now have to figure out how to build a peace from the ashes of war. 3 months after the guns fell silent, Captain Minu walked through the streets of a colony world called Keeper's Rest. Human soldiers patrolled the streets, but their weapons were lowered. Civilians went about their daily lives, shopping in markets and walking their children to school. It was strange to see after so much violence. Minu commanded the occupation force on this world. It was not a job he had wanted, but it was a job that needed doing. Someone had to ensure the peace held. Someone had to protect both the civilians and the human personnel. A civilian approached him as he walked. She was elderly, her crystalline skin showing the marks of many years. She carried a bag of groceries and looked tired. "Excuse me," she said in accented English. The had learned human languages quickly. "I have a question." "Go ahead," Minu said, stopping to face her. "Why show mercy now?" she asked. "Your people destroyed our military. You killed hundreds of thousands of our soldiers. Why not finish the job? Why not kill us all?" Minu was quiet for a moment. It was a question he had heard before from others. They did not understand why humanity had stopped when victory was complete. "Because we're not you," Minu said finally. "Your leaders destroyed New Haven completely. They killed everyone. Men, women, children. They did not discriminate. They did not show mercy." He looked at the woman. "We could have done the same. We could have burned every world to ash. We had the power. We had the anger, but we didn't. Do you know why?" The woman shook her head. "Because killing civilians doesn't bring back the dead," Minu said. "It doesn't make New Haven whole again. It just creates more graves and more grief. We came here for justice, not revenge. Justice means punishing the guilty, not the innocent." The woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you, Captain, for your restraint." She walked away and Minu continued his patrol. Around him, the colony was slowly returning to normal. Shops were open. Schools were teaching. Life was continuing. That was good. That was what they had fought for. On Earth, in the Great Assembly Hall, the trial had begun. The High Council sat in the defendant's box, guarded by human soldiers. Ambassador Sora stood as the chief prosecutor. Representatives from a dozen alien species sat as observers, watching to see how humanity would handle justice. Sora presented the evidence methodically. She showed the attack on New Haven in complete detail. She showed the diplomatic offers that had been rejected. She showed the timeline proving the attack was planned and deliberate. Council leader sat and listened. He did not deny the charges. He could not. The evidence was overwhelming. "The defense may speak," the judge said. Stood slowly. He looked older now than he had during the war. Prison and guilt had aged him. "I have no defense," said. "We did what we are accused of. We destroyed New Haven. We killed 340,000 humans. We did this because we believed humans were weak. We believed one show of force would make you abandon your claim to that system." He paused. "We were wrong about everything. We underestimated your strength. We underestimated your resolve. And we underestimated your capacity for restraint. You could have destroyed our entire species. You did not. That shows more strength than we ever had." Sora stood. "The prosecution accepts the defendant's statement. We request the maximum sentence under interstellar law for genocide." The trial continued for 2 weeks. Testimony was heard from survivors, from military personnel, from experts. In the end, the verdict was unanimous: guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment for all members of the High Council. Their personal assets were seized to help fund the reconstruction of New Haven. They would spend the rest of their lives in a secure facility, a reminder of the cost of genocide. Was led away in chains. As he passed Sora, he stopped and looked at her. "Your restraint saved my people," he said quietly. "I hope they remember that. I hope they learn from it." "So do I," Sora replied. On Mars, Admiral stood in the Fleet Command Center and watched the deployment board. The 700,000 ships that had fought the war were being stood down. 650,000 would return to reserve status. their crews released back to civilian life. 50,000 would remain active as a permanent rapid response force. It was the right decision. Humanity could not maintain such a massive military in peacetime, but they could maintain enough to respond quickly if another threat emerged. The galaxy had learned that humans could mobilize overwhelming force. Now they would learn that humans kept that force ready. Admiral entered the command center. She had been promoted after the war and now served as second in command. "The last of the reserve fleet ships are entering storage," she reported. "The process should be complete within a week." "Good," said, "and the active fleet?" "Deployed to strategic locations throughout human space. We've positioned squadrons near all major colonies and trade routes. Response time to any crisis will be under 6 hours." Nodded. 6 hours was good. If another species decided to test humanity, they would learn very quickly that the lesson of the war had not been forgotten. "What about our people?" asked, "the ones who fought?" "Most are returning to their homes," said. "Some are choosing to remain in active service. Others," she trailed off. "Others are having trouble adjusting," finished. He understood. Combat changed people. Even a war as one-sided as this one left scars. "We're setting up counseling services and support networks," said. "It will take time, but we'll help them." On Eden's Rest colony, Sargent sat in his backyard and watched his daughters play. Was throwing a ball with her younger sister. They were laughing, safe, alive. That was what mattered. His wife came out with tea and sat beside him. She took his hand. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I'm okay," said. It was mostly true. He still had nightmares sometimes. He still saw the faces of the 3 soldiers he had lost. But he was home and his family was safe, and that was enough. "I got a letter today," said. "From the parents of Corporal. He was one of my squad members." "Is he?" asked. "He's alive," said quickly. "Back on Earth. But he wanted his parents to thank me for bringing him home safely. They invited us to visit if we're ever on Earth." "That's nice," said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. This was what they had fought for. Not glory or conquest or revenge. Just this. The simple right to live in peace and watch their children grow. On Earth, construction began on the New Haven Memorial. It would be a massive structure, carved from white stone, listing all 340,000 names of those who died. People from across human space donated to the construction. Billions visited once it was complete. President spoke at the memorial's dedication ceremony. He was older now, ready to retire after guiding humanity through its darkest period in generations. "We built this memorial," said, "not to celebrate war but to remember peace. Every name on these walls represents someone who chose the frontier. They chose to build something new, to create a better future. They did not choose to die." He looked at the crowd. Thousands had gathered, including many military personnel who had fought in the war. "They took these lives from us," continued. "And we responded. We responded with force that shocked the galaxy. We proved that humanity, when pushed, can mobilize power that no other species can match. But we also proved something more important. We proved that power can be controlled. We proved that anger can be focused. We proved that justice does not require genocide. They attacked civilians, so we destroyed their military. They killed indiscriminately, so we killed only soldiers. They showed no mercy, so we showed restraint." He gestured to the memorial. "These people are gone. Nothing we do can bring them back, but we can honor them by remembering why we fight. We fight to protect. We fight for justice. We fight so that no other human world becomes New Haven." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. 340,000 seconds of silence, one for each life lost. It took 4 days. People stood in shifts, keeping vigil. When it ended, everyone felt the weight of what had been lost and what had been defended. In neutral space, the Republic sent a new ambassador to Earth. The Republic wanted to formalize relations with humanity. They wanted trade agreements and defensive pacts. They wanted to align themselves with the species that had shown such devastating military power combined with moral restraint. Ambassador Sara met with the delegation in Geneva. The meeting was cordial but firm. The Republic wishes to offer humanity a seat on the Galactic Council, the ambassador said. And what would that seat cost us? Sora asked. Nothing, the ambassador replied. We simply believe that humanity has proven itself worthy of leadership in galactic affairs. Sora smiled slightly. 3 months ago you urged restraint. You offered mediation. You told us that 700,000 ships was excessive. Now you offer us leadership. The ambassador had the grace to look embarrassed. We underestimated humanity, as did we will not make that mistake again. Neither will anyone else, Sora said. That's the point. The galaxy saw what humanity can do when provoked. Now the galaxy will think very carefully before provoking us again. She stood. We'll consider your offer, but understand this. Humanity will not be controlled or manipulated. We will participate in galactic affairs on our own terms. We will defend our interests, and we will always remember New Haven. Years passed. They integrated slowly into the new order. They paid reparations. They rebuilt their society without a military. They learned to live as partners with humanity rather than enemies. New Haven was rebuilt. The new colony was called New Haven II, and its first residents were descendants and relatives of those who had died. They came to honor memory and to prove that humanity would not be driven from the stars. On the 5th anniversary of the war's end, Captain Minu visited New Haven II. He walked through streets that bore the same names as the old streets. He visited parks named after people he had known. He stood at the spot where his cousin's house had been. A young girl approached him. She was maybe 10 years old with her mother's eyes. "Are you Captain Minu?" she asked. "I am," Minu said. "My teacher said you were the one who found what happened here, to the old colony." "That's right," Minu said. The girl was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for remembering them, for making sure they got justice." Minu knelt down to be at her eye level. "What's your name?" The girl said, "I'm named after my grandmother. She died in the old colony." Minu felt his throat tighten. His cousin. This girl was his cousin's granddaughter born after the war, carrying her grandmother's name forward. "Your grandmother was a good person," Minu said. "She would be proud of you." The girl smiled and ran back to her mother. Minu stood and looked at the colony around him. Children playing, adults working, life continuing. This was the victory, not the destroyed ships or the captured council members. This, life persisting despite tragedy. In space above the colony, a single human warship maintained permanent orbit. The destroyer carried advanced sensors and weapons. Its crew rotated every 6 months, but the ship never left. It was a guardian and a promise. In the ship's mess hall, young crew members ate and joked and lived their lives. They had not fought in the war. They knew it only from history lessons, but they understood their duty. Above them in deeper space, 699,999 more warships waited in reserve, silent, ready, watching. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was patient. Humanity was peaceful. Humanity wanted only to explore and grow and build. But humanity would defend its own with overwhelming force, and anyone who forgot that lesson would learn it again, as the had learned it. In the end, New Haven had not died in vain. It had died as a warning that would echo through the stars for generations to come. Never mistake human patience for human weakness. Never,